bloodbaths. The victims were slaughtered according to the oaths of loyalty sworn by members of the Masonic religion. Now, for the first time on film, we can reveal the truth about Jack the Ripper. Diaries written by Inspector Aberline of Scotland Yard at the time of the Ripper murders have been held in safekeeping by Joseph Sickert, whose father was an artist who gave art lessons to Prince Albert Victor, the heir to the throne of the British Empire in the 19th century. Prince Albert Victor was known as Prince Eddie. He was the son of Queen Alexandra and the grandson of Queen Victoria. During the last 120 years, royal spin doctors have led the public to believe that Queen Victoria was popular. She was not. Often hissed in public, Queen Victoria was a German, and so was her husband. They were great supporters and patrons of World International Freemasonry. Queen Victoria's son became King Edward VII. He was King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, King of the Commonwealth realms, and the Emperor of India. He was the first British monarch to carry the name of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha onto the throne. Edward VII was part of the Germanic royal dynasty which had sponsored the writing career of Adam Weishaupt, a Jesuit who had formed the Bavarian Illuminati in the 1770s. The Bavarian Illuminati infiltrated the upper echelons of Freemasonry, preaching a secret doctrine of a new world order, a global superstate where compassion and democracy would have no place. Since the 1700s, the Bavarian Illuminati has fragmented into an invisible global network of secret societies, which includes the infamous Skull and Bones fraternity at Yale University in the United States. Adam Weishaupt's doctrine of a new world order was laid out in 3 books which he wrote in the later years of his life. He lived in the town of Gotha, and his writing career was funded by the Saxe-Coburg dynasty, who came to the British throne through Edward VII. Edward VII was installed as Grand Master of British Freemasonry in 1875. He regularly appeared in public wearing the ceremonial uniform of a Masonic Grand Master. Like his Saxe-Coburg grandparents, King Edward VII was one of the biggest financial contributors to the Illuminati version of Freemasonry. He was crowned in 1901. Masonic lodges existed in several royal palaces, most notably in Kensington Palace, which was home to the Royal Alpha Lodge. It was here, in 1885, that King Edward VII initiated his own son, Prince Albert Victor, better known as Prince Eddie. Prince Eddie was genetically handicapped. Generation after generation of inbreeding within the Saxe-Coburg bloodline had resulted in Prince Eddie, the heir to the throne, being partially deaf. With typical cruelty, most of the royal family had no time for a partially deaf person, and Eddie's brother was groomed instead to take the throne after Edward VII died. Along with the great and the good of Victorian and Edwardian society, Prince Eddie spent much of his time enjoying himself at the taxpayers' expense in various brothels. Prince Eddie was a regular visitor of a homosexual paedophile brothel in Cleveland Street, London. Alistair Crowley, who claims to have been a member of the 1591 Studholme Masonic Lodge and also a visitor to the Royal Alpha Lodge at Kensington Palace, was in possession of love letters between Prince Eddie and a young boy at the brothel. This was a potential scandal for the heir to the throne, but the aristocracy supported the idea of paedophilia at the time. In fact, there was a revolt in the House of Lords when the age of consent was raised from 12 to 13 years of age. In fact, a much bigger scandal was soon to break, when it was revealed that Prince Eddie had made a young girl called Annie Crook pregnant. Prince Eddie had secretly married her, even though he was forbidden to marry a Roman Catholic. Officially, this meant that he would not be able to become king. In 1884, the Pope had condemned the satanic nature of Freemasonry, and the royal political elite split into two factions, one Catholic and anti-Masonic, and the other Protestant, fiercely guarding the real power behind the throne, which was World International Freemasonry. Prince Eddie had secretly married a Catholic, and that was a form of treason. It infuriated powerful Freemasons. Mixed with a potent dash of royal paedophilia and Alistair Crowley's collection of homosexual love letters between the prince and a young boy, the British establishment was facing perhaps the biggest scandal ever to have rocked the monarchy. They decided to do what the monarchy has always done: stage a massive cover-up operation. In 1885, Annie Crook was kidnapped from the sweet shop where she worked, and simultaneously Prince Eddie was forced into a carriage which galloped away in the opposite direction. It was the last the young newlywed couple ever saw of each other. Prince Eddie was taken back to Buckingham Palace and strictly forbidden to leave the premises. Annie Crook was illegally incarcerated at Guy's Hospital, where one of Queen Victoria's doctors, the wicked Sir William Gull, picked some of her brain out with tweezers, turning her into a mentally retarded, pathetic shadow of her former self. However, Annie Crook had told several friends about her marriage to the young prince. Annie had just given birth to a baby, a bastard heir to the British throne. Dr. William Gull kept Annie Crook imprisoned for 156 days in Guy's Hospital, and then sent her and her baby to workhouses where they were used as slave labour. One of Annie's friends, a young girl called Mary Kelly, worked part-time as a prostitute at Whitechapel in East London. Mary Kelly and a group of her friends decided to write a blackmail letter demanding money from the royal family. The year was 1888. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn had been formed the same year. Freemasons marched in full ceremonial regalia in public. The Bavarian Illuminati had splintered into a secret society inside another secret society. All the thrones of Europe were occupied by royal Masons. What Mary Kelly and her group of friends had not counted on is that not only were they trying to blackmail royal Masons, they were blackmailing psychopathic crowned killers who would prefer to kill rather than give over a single penny of their wealth. The occult powers behind the throne convened a special meeting at the Royal Alpha Lodge in Kensington Palace. This elite group of Masons called themselves Princes of the Blood Royal. And they decided to form a ruthless hunting party which would hunt down and ritually murder Mary Kelly and her friends, thus putting an end to the blackmail attempt. Sir Charles Warren, a senior Freemason and head of the Metropolitan Police, provided intelligence on the whereabouts of Mary Kelly and her female friends. Sir William Gull prepared grapes injected with opium and alcohol, which would be offered to the girls. John Netley, a ruffian coach driver who worked for several aristocrats, would supply transportation. And J.K. Stephen, a socialite of Victorian London, would act as a lookout whilst the ritualised murders would take place inside Netley's horse-drawn carriage. According to the diaries of Inspector Aberline of Scotland Yard, diaries which were sealed in wax and held in safekeeping by the Victorian Impressionist painter and friend of Prince Eddie, William Sickert, the so-called Jack the Ripper murders were not the work of one crazy individual. These were meticulously planned ritual murders conducted in the Masonic tradition by a large group of aristocrats who hunted the young female victims rather like a country expedition killing foxes. So who was the leader of the Jack the Ripper gang? None other than one of Britain and Ireland's most senior Freemasons, the son of a duke, member of Her Majesty's Privy Council, an Oxford graduate, a justice of the peace, Secretary of State for India, Member of Parliament for South Paddington in London, Chancellor of the Exchequer, Leader of the House of Commons in the British Parliament, friend of King Edward VII, and Mason Magister Majestic Magistorium of the Orange Order in Ireland, future father of Britain's most famous Prime Minister. The leader of the Jack the Ripper gang was Lord Randolph Spencer Churchill. It was Lord Randolph Spencer Churchill who sliced Masonic emblems into the faces of the victims. It was he who coordinated the so-called Jack the Ripper murders. And this film puts an end to a 120-year cover-up by the royal political elite of Great Britain. Until the young Lady Diana Spencer became Princess of Wales, Lord Randolph Spencer Churchill was the most famous member in the history of the Spencer aristocratic family. Her Royal Highness Princess Diana was herself a Spencer, a family which has served the monarchy for generations. She is distantly related to Lord Randolph Spencer Churchill, Jack the Ripper, and his son, Winston Churchill. Randolph Spencer Churchill was no stranger to the occult. He ripped and slashed the victims, slicing Masonic symbols into their faces. According to Masonic instruction, the internal organs of the victims were torn out and trailed over their left shoulder. For these murders were ritual sacrifices, a public warning to anyone who was considering to commit treason. In his characteristic manner, Aleister Crowley soon left Britain after the Jack the Ripper murders. The love letters between Prince Eddie and the young boy prostitute never surfaced in the public domain. J.K. Stephen, one of the aristocratic gang of murderers, was so ashamed and shocked by the ritual psychopathic behaviour of Lord Randolph Spencer Churchill that he made his confession to Inspector Abberline at Scotland Yard. Of course, there were no arrests. In fact, Scotland Yard still, to this day, take great care to cover up the true significance and detail of the Jack the Ripper Masonic murders. When author Stephen Knight was given access to the Ripper file at Scotland Yard, he found that many important documents had been deliberately lost. Stephen Knight discovered later that some of the documents he had seen during his research for his book, Jack the Ripper: The Final Solution, had subsequently been destroyed. Soon after the publication of Jack the Ripper: The Final Solution, and also after having exposed the true nature of demonic Freemasonry in his excellent book called The Brotherhood, Stephen Knight was dead.
Now, what Diana says, again in her own words, is that she was told when the birth of William was coming along that she was going to be induced so that the child would be born, wait for this, in line with Charles's polo playing program. Now, first of all, even if that was true, which it wasn't, what does that say about a father that would have an induced child so it would suit his polo playing program? But what was the real story? If you go back to ancient Babylon and the rituals of these people, they're fundamentally connected to the sun and the cycles of the sun. Nimrod, Baal, the sun god. And one of the key days of the year in their ritual calendar, therefore, is the summer solstice. They induced William to be born when? The summer solstice. And this is what's going on around us all the time. There's a movie, which that television is telling us is reality. And then there's what's really going on, which is so different. That's its greatest form of defense. The chasm that people have to leap between what they are told is happening and what's really happening. A confidant, Christian Fitzgerald, told me that people who did not support these black occult networks that controlling not just Britain but increasingly the world, that were feeding her information and warning her that she was in danger. What keeps this whole thing from coming out, and has done for us all this time, and indeed the wider conspiracy too, is that to understand it you have to research so many different subjects and then fit the strands together before you go, wow, so that's what it's all about. In this soundbite world of superficiality we call the mainstream media, people get so little information that they can't see what's going on. So when you look at the story of Diana, it's not just about what's happening now, what happened in 97. It's also going back again to Babylon, places like that. The goddess Diana was an ancient goddess, which was another name for the Babylonian goddess Queen Semiramis, the goddess of the Illuminati. And one of the groups of people that worshipped Diana, the goddess, and did their rituals to her were called the Merovingians. The Merovingians are one of the, if not the, key bloodline in the whole Illuminati network. They were the royal line of a people called at one stage the Cambrian Franks, which is where we get France from, that came out of the time of the Trojan Wars in now what we now call Turkey, up through the Caucasus Mountains and into what we now call France. Eventually, their royal strand, the Merovingians, were what the whole people became known as. And they were great goddess Diana worshippers. And according to an American researcher in Paris, immediately after Diana died, the Merovingians dug underground sacrificial chambers in Paris, just outside the original Paris, well inside, of course, the present metropolis, where they did their rituals to the goddess Diana. And according to her, the place is now called the Pont d'Alma Tunnel, which is still an underground kind of location. Now, the ancient myths of the goddess Diana were that she was a moon goddess. Pont d'Alma actually translates as passage or bridge of the moon goddess. Coincidence? Why is it with the absolutely, I cannot emphasize this enough, the ritual symbolism obsessed Illuminati, why is it that even people who said, well, it was an accident, have actually said, well, there is one question. Why was Diana held in that tunnel for so long when she's supposed to have had internal bleeding, which needed repairing? Why not get her to hospital immediately? Why was she held in that tunnel for the best part of an hour and a half? Why? Because in the sick ritual, and that's what it was, the ritual of her murder, she had to die in that place of ancient sacrifice to the goddess Diana. And it was when she died that they then moved her out. And of course, goodness knows what have happened to her internal organs, because this is what these sick people use in their rituals. Interestingly, when you look at the stories and myths surrounding the goddess Diana, over and over again, the theme of lakes, of islands, and particularly of the tree grove come up again and again and again. It was the tree grove that was the sacred place of worship to the goddess Diana, not a temple. Now, she wanted to be interned in the little church where her father is, just off the Spencer estate in Northamptonshire. And after her death, Earl Spencer says that he decided that she would be buried on the Spencer estate. Where? On an island, in a lake, in a tree grove. And there's also this bizarre story where Earl Spencer says that he had this dream that he had to put 4 black swans on the lake. And he then said to his estate manager, I've had this dream. Do you know where we can get 4 black swans from? And the estate manager said, well, sir, funnily enough, someone's just offered us 4. Oh, yeah, okay. I've seen a pig. Never mind a bloody swan. Look, there it goes.
Black swans are an occult symbol, aren't they?
Exactly. The whole thing's a cult. And the whole of Diana's assassination was an occult ritual unfolding. Now, what's kind of interesting to me is that when I was researching The Biggest Secret, which I wrote in 1998, which is kind of unfolding now before our eyes, one of the people that I was introduced to was a lady called Christine Fitzgerald, who, as the tabloid media in Britain acknowledged, was a close confidant of Princess Diana for 9 years. They fell out a little while before her death, but for 9 years they were big time close. And Christine Fitzgerald is a hands-on alternative healer and into the esoteric, and therefore Diana could talk to her about things that other people would think, oh, that Diana's mad, she's talking about this, that, and the other now. And I had long conversations with Christine Fitzgerald about the background to Diana and things that she experienced with her. And I had to have a wry smile to myself when the Paul Burrell revelations came out, because much of it was told to me years ago and is in The Biggest Secret. Not least that friendly people from organizations like MI5 were actually feeding Diana information, saying, be very, very careful because they want rid of you. And so when Burrell produced this letter from Diana in which she predicted her own death in a car crash, in effect, It absolutely fits with what Christian Fitzgerald told me about her experience and what Diana said to her.
Diana was under intense surveillance by MI5 and MI6 at home and when she travelled outside the UK. Now, yesterday you made this interesting comment that she was the most photographed woman in the world.
While she was alive.
While she was alive. But the route in Paris, which is going through, you know, the biggest, most famous roads in Paris, is it true to say that there is not 1 single second of video footage from any CCTV camera?
It is indeed, yeah. There are 10 known cameras that were on lining the route that night, but they were all, now we know officially from the Lord Stevens report, that all of those cameras were pointing inwards towards the buildings that housed them. So none of them were pointing towards the road. So therefore we have, allegedly, we have no footage whatsoever of Diana's journey or of the crash itself.
There's one photo of Dodie with Diana. Would you say that that is a photo that was taken on the actual last fatal journey?
Yeah, that's a photo of them leaving the Ritz, yeah, I think. I would say so, yeah.
Now, the interesting thing about these photos by the paparazzi, because presumably that's been photographed from the back of a motorcycle.
Possibly, or by one of the paparazzi outside the Ritz when they left the Ritz that night.
Okay, so you would normally see a seatbelt going across somebody's shoulder because Diana's sitting in the rear seat, and therefore the seatbelt would be coming from here and going across. There's no seatbelt there.
No, we know for sure now that none of the occupants were wearing their seatbelts, which is odd, really. But certainly in Diana's case, it's very strange because the minute news of her death reached Britain, all of her closest friends started to say, you know, why wasn't she wearing a seatbelt? It had become a religion for her to wear a seatbelt. She always wore her seatbelt. It was an obsession for her. But now we know, strangely, from Lord Stevens' report, again, that Diana's seatbelt in particular was jammed in the retracted position. That is a quote, verbatim, from Lord Stevens' report. Diana's seatbelt, the rear right seatbelt, was jammed in the retracted position, so she was unable to put her seatbelt on. Even though the others may have been able to, she was unable to. So that's just an interesting point that's come out of the report.
After Prince Eddie learned of the bloodthirsty campaign of murder unleashed by the Masonic monarchy, and saw the horrific photos of Mary Kelly and her friends in newspapers, he had a nervous breakdown at Sandringham. Sandringham was the birthplace of Princess Diana. When Prince Eddie learned of the evil partial lobotomy performed on his young Catholic wife, it was the final nail in the coffin for his sanity. However, the Masonic murderers had not completed their task. Lord Salisbury, the Prime Minister, now ordered Lord Randolph Spencer Churchill to kill Prince Eddie's wife and also their illegitimate bastard child. Luckily, Annie Crook escaped into the hinterland of obscure poverty. She gave her child, Alice Crook, to the artist friend of Prince Eddie, Walter Sickert, who moved to Dieppe in France. A romance eventually developed, and Walter Sickert married the young Alice Crook. They eventually had a child, a baby son, who is Joseph Sickert, the man who kept the diaries of Inspector Abberline and the truth about the Jack the Ripper murders secret for 5 decades. Still, the devilish cover-up plan had not ended. Prince Eddie himself then became the victim of a royal conspiracy. The Earl of Strathmore, who owned the huge Glamis Castle, was employed to imprison young Prince Eddie. The royal family lied to the entire world and announced Prince Eddie's death on the 14th of January 1892, whilst secretly keeping him prisoner in hidden chambers at Balmoral and eventually later at Glamis Castle. Balmoral Castle sits by the River Dee, just north of Lochnagar, 9 miles west of Ballater. Balmoral has 25,000 private acres of forest and deer parks, all maintained at the public's expense. It was here at Balmoral, a Scottish stronghold standing nearly 1,000 feet above sea level, that was chosen as the place where Prince Eddie would be murdered. Lord Randolph Spencer Churchill and his coach driver, John Netley, were dispatched to Balmoral, where they pushed the young prince off a cliff. Amazingly, Prince Eddie survived the murder attempt and 2 days later crawled back to the gates of Balmoral, a shattered and broken man, the heir to the throne completely heartbroken at having his young wife lobotomized and separated from his only child. The 13th Earl of Strathmore made a pact with the royal family. In exchange for keeping Prince Eddie imprisoned at his Glamis Castle, one of his daughters would marry a future King of England. Glamis Castle has more than 100 rooms and many secret chambers. Shakespeare wrote about how Macbeth committed murder in the Great Hall. Glamis Castle is one of the most haunted places on Earth. On the floor of King Malcolm's room, there was an indelible blood stain which would not be washed away. The royal family eventually boarded the floor over. It was here, at Glamis Castle, that Prince Eddie, his spirit broken, was imprisoned for the rest of his life. He died eventually in 1933, 41 years after the royal family had officially proclaimed him dead. His mother, Queen Alexandra, visited Prince Eddie just once. She took a photo of her son and sent it to her sister, who was the Empress of Russia. For the first time on film, we can now see this photo, a picture of a broken-hearted man imprisoned against his will, sitting alone in a small chamber, painting pictures which no one would ever see. Prince Eddie should have been king, but instead became a prisoner of the royal family. Rumours of a secret prisoner at Glamis Castle circulated amongst the staff for decades after. This was not the first time the royal aristocratic elite had imprisoned one of their own at Glamis Castle. According to official records, in October 1821, a son was born to the 11th Earl of Glamis. Because of royal inbreeding, the baby was hideously deformed. His parents, in a typically aristocratic, cruel manner, refused to announce the birth of their child as a future earl. Their son was badly deformed, resembling an egg with a hairy face and incredibly muscular arms. His parents illegally registered the baby as dead at birth. The son was never given an official name, even though he lived for more than 50 years, bricked up in a chamber, being fed via a slit in a stone wall. Rumours of the so-called Glamis monster persisted right up until the middle of the 20th century. The Glamis monster was in actual fact great uncle to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. The pact made between the royal family and the Earl of Strathmore was eventually fulfilled. In exchange for illegally imprisoning young Prince Eddie, a daughter of one of the Earls of Strathmore would marry a future King of England. The girl born in 1900 and groomed to fulfill the pact was Elizabeth Marguerite, who married the future King George VI. King George's real name was Albert. He was Provisional Grand Master Mason of Middlesex and was installed as Grand Master of Scotland by a Masonic lodge which met from time to time at Glamis Castle. In 1936 he became king, and his wife became the beloved Queen Mother of Queen Elizabeth II. She recently died after several whole-body blood transfusions, and, unlike the death of Princess Diana, the Buckingham Palace flag was lowered to half-mast immediately following the Queen Mother's death. The Queen Mother, who had spent much of her childhood in the haunted halls of Glamis Castle, went to her grave with the royal spin machine in full swing, hiding the macabre secret to why she had been chosen as queen by King George VI. Their daughter, Elizabeth Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, whose family had invented the fake British name of Windsor to hide their German bloodline, was coronated in the bastardized version of King Solomon's occult ceremony at Westminster Abbey in 1953. The payoff for the Spencer-Churchill family was self-evident. Lord Randolph Spencer Churchill's son, Winston, was made Prime Minister, and in 2 generations to come, a Spencer girl, the young, innocent, virginal Diana, would be groomed from birth to serve the royal oligarchy and marry the bachelor Prince Charles. The legacy of the Jack the Ripper murders continued. The Spencer Churchill family eventually received an immense payment from the newly formed National Lottery in Britain. Winston Churchill was theatrically trained by his father to give speeches in the House of Commons in the exact same fake statesman-like style his father, Lord Randolph Spencer Churchill, had used. In fact, some of the most important speeches of Winston Churchill were actually re-recorded by an actor, and it is these fake speeches which are often played on radio and television. Winston Churchill often visited Azni in Morocco, where he would bugger young Arabian boys whilst writing his memoirs, completely exonerating his father's memory in a sycophantic fake biography. Princess Diana's branch of the Spencer family was described in the media as a family which had always served the British monarchy. It is clear that the Spencer family had clearly been chosen as the genetic material from which a future heir to the British throne would come. Before marrying the virginal and innocent Princess Diana, Prince Charles had had affairs with both of Diana's sisters. Princess Diana had been born on the royal Sandringham estate. Diana was psychologically groomed to breed a future heir to the throne. In Diana's own words, once she had given birth to an heir and a spare, the cruel-hearted Saxe-Coburg dynasty returned to their evil ways and ostracized Diana, eventually stripping Diana's HRH title. Following Diana's appearance on the BBC's Panorama programme, where she criticised the royal family, British military intelligence were ordered to plan a brutal car accident which would kill the people's princess.